Hi, Trevor here, reflecting on live stream music. Thank you for stopping by. Well, coming again today, you're very, very welcome. I trust you enjoyed my last video on very expressive, almost ethereal Grace Jones, and through her song Slave to the Rhythm, we looked at the concept of just giving yourself fully to music and to the rhythm of life. So I trust you found that one encouraging. We're going from there to 1968 in London. The initial people, this band would have a lot of lineup changes, so Robert Fripp, Michael Giles, Greg Lake, Ian McDonald and Peter Sinfield were at the start of this band. Components of classical, folk, heavy metal, Gamelian, blues, industrial, electronic and experimental. And these guys are considered one of the pioneers of progressive rock. Now, when you think about progressive rock, you think of the UK, you think of bands like Yes, The Buggles, Asia, and even Toto over in the US to a certain extent. Very, very talented musicians. We're not looking at just songs here, we're looking at works of art. And this is what makes progressive rock so progressive, actually, is the fact that they really did stretch the boundaries of rock and roll into new eras. And we owe a lot to the UK in particular for this movement. The band we're talking about is King Crimson. Now, I first met King Crimson through the band Asia. Now, Asia I've looked at before, supergroup, including frontman, bass player, John Wetton. Now, John's no longer with us, unfortunately, but John did actually join King Crimson, and this is where the first have heard about these guys. The name, interestingly, King Crimson has been associated with Beelzebub, the throne room of hell, but no, it goes a bit more than that, and it's more around societal rumblings and trying to capture the rumblings of society. The rehearsals would start in January 1969, and one of the key catchphrases for King Crimson of the early stages was, if music is popular, it's out. We want to be actually complicated, and we want to be eclectic, and we really want to push the bounds of what music can absolutely do. Their first performance was at the Speakeasy Club in London on the 9th of April 1969, but it was a few months later, actually, when they supported the Rolling Stones in Hyde Park. That was a free concert. 500,000 people rocked up to that concert, and so what a great scoop to be asked to support the Rolling Stones at a big concert like that. We've got a live clip all the way from that particular show. Actually, I found a brief snippet of the 21st Century Schizoid Man, and here we can see that King Crimson are just so different in many, many ways. So I've got a live version of that one below from that concert from Hyde Park, which is pretty cool. But in October 1969, one of their massive albums, In the Court of the Crimson King, would be released. This was an instant smash, this album. It was an uncanny masterpiece, but full of dark and doom-laden lyrics. Of course, around 1969, there were a lot of things going on. We had the Vietnam War. We had Man Walking on the Moon as well. We had the hippie movement. A lot of things were happening in the late 1960s era, and the concept of trying to express that in music was done in various ways. And King Crimson really did capitalize on that movement in just being able to take a step back a little bit and look at the big picture of life and the big picture of music. So In the Court of the Crimson King was a massive album for these guys. I've already talked about the fact that we've got a live version going back to 1969 of the 21st Century Schizoid Man. What a great name for a song, by the way. We move forward to 2015, and we've actually got a live version of that song as well. In fact, in the 2015 version, we've actually got 3 drum kits. This is what made King Crimson so unique in many, many ways, is they weren't scared to shake things up. It's hard enough having one drummer keeping time, but when you've got three keeping time with each other, it just goes to show how incredibly talented these guys are. Now, you can't talk about King Crimson without talking about the song In the Court of the Crimson King. And we've got a live version of this one below. This particular song got to number 80 in the top 100. And here we've got frontman John Wetton actually singing this song here. Now, I have a lot of the world actually has very fond memories of John Wetton, particularly with his time with Asia. He was very much the driving force behind Asia. But when he left this world, everyone got a little bit sad that such a significant player in the world of progressive rock actually left this world. So it's nice to actually see John Wetton singing the classic King Crimson song below, in the clip below. Wasn't sure where I was going to go with this one today, but I think in the concept of King Crimson and the way that they did push the boundaries, it's almost like we don't need permission to push the boundaries. We don't need permission. We're just going to do it anyway. But we're going to do it in a way that is compelling and in a way that's going to make you take notice and just get swept along with what is our just eclectic musical style. I don't know how it is that there are some certain personalities in this world that do that. You know, they might be larger than life sort of characters as well. They might be a bit weird and a bit strange, but there's just something compelling about them at the same time. They're not part of the status quo. They are actually stretching the status quo into new areas. But instead of people just kind of rejecting it and think, nah, this is just too weird, people get swept along for the ride. And the concept of the Crimson King, now let's just put aside, you know, what people may particularly think about that. Let's just think about the fact that you're in the court of someone important. And you're there. Say, for example, you know, let's think about, as an example, you know, someone being knighted in the UK by the king, and they walk into the king and they kneel, take the kneel, and they get dubbed Sir such and such and Sir Dame such and such. Well, in that particular situation there, you are absolutely entitled to be there. And you'll be thinking, well, you know, what's the king? And, you know, he's the king and I'm just me. But you've been summoned to the court. You've been summoned for a reason. You've been summoned because you want to be acknowledged or you want to get some award for your contribute to society. In that particular situation then, you have a right to be there. You're expected to be there. In fact, if you're not there, it's seen as an insult. And I liken this a little bit more to, you know, the situations that we find ourselves in from time to time. You know, sometimes we think we're faking it till we make it. Like classic situation, a job interview. You know, you're sitting out in the waiting room, and we all know that job interviews start the minute you walk into the building. So the receptionist is watching you. She's watching you if you're going to get on your phone or not. So just be aware of that, all you young players out there. If you're going for a job interview, you put your phone away, okay? But you're actually going to a job interview because you're deemed to have sufficient skill for the job. As we know, resumes are actually designed to get job interviews. So they've looked at your resume, they thought, you know what, we think you've got sufficient skill for the job. We're going to just have a chat to you and see if we think our assumptions about you are correct. Well, so the concept of how you actually conduct yourself in that situation is really, really important. So you can't sort of just walk sheepishly into the office and say, oh, hi, how you doing? I hope I'm going to be all right for the job. No, you don't think that. You're thinking, actually, I can do this job. And so it kind of goes against the whole, oh, am I good enough? Am I good enough? Am I good enough? Well, no, somebody else has already decided that you are. So you need to give your best without being big-headed and answer the questions in very insightful ways. And then, you know, when you leave the job interview, you know that you've given it your best shot. You've answered the questions well. You know, one of the big questions is, why should we hire you? That is not, well, because I think I'm good for the job. No, you've got to sell the job back to them. Well, you're looking for sales experience and customer experience. Well, you know, and you want customers to feel like they've been looked after. That sort of stuff is the way you answer questions like that one. But going back to your right to be there, you've got sufficient skill to do the job. Let's take this one step further. You know, you might be, it might be at a party as an example, and you know, you might be feeling a little bit anxious and concerned and worried about how you're coming across. Well, you have a right to be at the party. You've actually been invited to be at the party. So you don't look over your shoulder thinking, oh, when are they going to discover that I really, you know, I'm not really feeling that great at the moment. Well, no, you have a right to be there. Now, we don't go away we don't think, I've got to write and look at me and like, God, we don't do that either. But in our heart of hearts, when you're trying to get that courage, I think, to be able to, you know, make the most of a situation, well, just keep that in your head. You have a right to be there. People actually want to know about you. So in the court of the Crimson King, you know, imagine, I just think about, you know, a king, you know, a pretty amazing throne room. You know, there might be, you know, you might be overwhelmed by the majesty and the splendor of the place. But if you've been summoned there and you've been invited to go to that room, well, you know, you are expected to be there. And when you're expected to be there, you're meant to front up in a certain way, you know, a little bit confident, a little bit happy that you're there, and also just show that level of kindness and humbleness at the same time. So in the court of Crimson King moments, tend to happen a lot, I think. You know, we got to fight off this thing of like, hey, shouldn't really be here, I don't belong here. Well, you know what? Yes, you do. So just look at those times as opportunities for growth, a time to not try to look for escape the minute you can. I know that I've done that in the past myself, but look for ways that you can actually immerse yourself in the actual event. So when you're feeling a bit funny about stuff next time, think about in the court of the Crimson King. And certainly in King Crimson, we're not scared to push the envelope with that, absolutely. So, it was around after that album that they started to tour in the UK and also the US with various acts. But around 1970, there was a bit of a state of flux with lineup changes. We were starting to see progressive rock really start to take off. Greg Lake, who had been doing lead vocals, went off to become part of Emerson, Lake and Palmer. And so after that, they released In the Wake of Poseidon in 1970. This got to number 4 in the UK and number 31 in the US. Also 1970, the album Lizard, number 29 in the UK, number 113 in the US. 1971, Islands, number 30 in the UK and number 76 in the US. And 1972, the album Earthbound, and they started to go more towards funk at this point. So there were a lot of albums in a very short space of time. But there were tensions, and this is the thing about King Crimson. I think when you are surrounded by creative geniuses, which King Crimson actually is, everyone's kind of got their own idea of how things should happen. And so Fripp decided, hey, you know what, let's actually do a new incarnation of King Crimson. So enter Jamie Moore, Bill Bruford, who was the drummer from Yes, John Wetton, who I've talked about, who would eventually go on to form Asia, and David Kress on keyboards. And they released the album 1973, Lark's Tongues in Aspic. What a great album title that one is. We've got a live version of the Lark's Tongue in Aspic. There's kind of a part 1 and part 2. Just listen to this. You'll be thinking, what on earth is going on here? This is King Crimson, guys. Innovative, incredibly brilliant and clever, but just different. And these guys exactly know what they're doing here on stage here. We've seen some absolute geniuses doing what they're doing here. So we've got a live version of Lark's Tongue in Aspect. We've also got the song, a studio version of Easy Money, and it's great to see John Wetton in this lineup here. In 1974, Starless and Bible Black was released. In 1974, the album Red was released, and we've got a live version of Starless all the way forward in 2015. And King Crimson really are just very, very unique in many, many ways, and they go about doing things. And even as late as 2015, these guys were still going strong. In 1982, the album Heartbeat, we got a live version of Beat Below. King Crimson were renowned for improvisation, and not only in the studio, but also live on stage. Now, improvisation is basically, hey, you guys can just do what you want, as long as you keep in time with the rest of us. And they had a very collective, creative decision-making ability about them. As I've already said, influenced such bands as Genesis and Yes. Kurt Cobain of Nirvana also quotes these guys as significant. And some of the bands that members have gone on, including Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Asia, Foreigner, and Bad Company. Between 1969 and 2003, there's been 13 studio albums, estimated to have sold around 10 million albums. So well and truly have contributed to not just music, but progressive rock in particular. So there's 7 clips are in the description below, and I've also included my last video from Grace Jones. So if you want to recap on her, feel free. Well, if this is your first time to Life Reflections Through Music, or you've come back for another one, how great to see you all here today. Well, that's it for today. Next time we're going to get on to Kool and the Gang. So until then, I'll catch you around. Bye for now.